Chapter 11 of Tractate Chullin continues going through the laws on the Kohanic animal part gift tithes. The first Mishnah says, another portion of an animal that must be given to a Kohen, as stated in this verse, is part of the Fleece. This applies inside and outside of Israel, when the temple does and does not exist, and only with unconsecrated animals. The obligation to give the foreleg, jaws, and abomasum to a Kohen, as discussed in the prior chapter, is more stringent than this, as it applies to both cattle and sheep, while this applies to just sheep. The obligation to give the fleece is stricter, as it applies to many animals. Beis Shammai says 2, Beis Hillel says 5. There is dispute by Beis Hillel if this means the gift is given when a mana and a half worth of wool is shorn. Others say it's given when any amount is shorn. The amount given to Kohanim is the weight of 5 salaim coins in Judea, which is the equivalent of 10 salaim in Galilee. The wool must be white and clean, and there should be enough to make a small garment. If the owner had dyed the wool before giving it, he's exempt from this gift. If he'd only whitened it, he'd still need to give it over. If somebody purchases a fleece from a non-Jewish person, he's exempt from giving the fleece gift to the Kohanim. If somebody buys fleece from a Jewish person, if he left some wool over with the seller must give the gift. If he did not, the buyer must give the gift. If the seller had brown and white sheep and somebody purchased just the brown sheep or just the male sheep, the buyer and the seller both need to give their own fleece portions. The Gemara sources the fact that this has no application by consecrated animals. Some actually say this exemption applies if the fleece itself on the animal was consecrated, which is discussed. There are various interpretations as to what exactly is being argued on by this case, quoting a number of verses that have their interpretations disputed. This dispute essentially revolves around whether we derive the laws of this fleece gift from the Terumah tithes, as if we do, we know we can't separate fleeces from new sheep for old ones, so if fleeces accumulate over many years, there's no obligation to give a fleece gift from there. If it's not derived from Terumah tithes, then this would be done. It additionally discusses difficulties with this comparison. Additionally, it mentions there were several lenient rulings made that this fleece gift and also the gifts from the prior chapter of the foreleg, jaws, and abomasum only have application within the land of Israel. Also, some other lenient rulings. It's permissible to study Torah while in a state of impurity, and also by the laws of forbidden plant mixtures, there's only liability if somebody simultaneously sows wheat, barley, and grapeseed in one motion. Additionally, when we compared the fleece and animal part gifts, we didn't mention that the fleece is stricter as it applies to animals with a defect, as this accords with the opinion that animals with a defect don't need their fleece given as a Kohanic gift, which is sourced. We had also stated that the obligation of the fleece gift only applies specifically to sheep. This is sourced from the fact that specific words are used in scripture by this topic. It also disputes as to how many sheep are needed for this gift. As mentioned, Beis Shammai said 2, while Beis Hillel said 5, and it actually brings a third opinion of a Rabbi Yossi, who says it actually goes by 4 sheep. Some actually wound up ruling like this last opinion. Some said the amount shorn for this tithe to apply would be in any amount. There's a few opinions as to how much exactly this is. Some said a total of a mana and a half, so long as everything is evenly divided into 5. Others said 60 salaim total, and the owner gives 1 selah as the gift. Others said 6 salaim, and the owner gives 5 of them to the Kohanim. And others just literally say any amount needs to have this tithe taken from it. It additionally debates between these opinions from a number of related discussions on laws of field charity minimums and related. The reason the wool must be whitened is so that the weight is honest and doesn't account for dirt in the wool to throw off the measurements. The fact that there must be enough to make a small garment is then sourced. It also lists the individuals who held the remaining points from the Mishnah that the fleece must be given by the one who took it or retained it by the sale. It's explained to be in accordance with a similar opinion in the last chapter on purchasing cow innards from a seller in regards to these Kohanic gifts, which essentially established that a person doesn't mean to sell these gifts to a Kohen, so if the seller retains them, he must still give the gift, and then this would also apply here by the fleece gifts. And that's the end of chapter 11. Chapter 12, the final chapter of Tractate Chullin, covers a bit of a unique law regarding the laws of animals, the principle of sending away a mother bird. The first Mishnah says, in these verses, it essentially establishes that if a person wants to take eggs from a nest, the mother bird must first be sent away. This principle is called Shaluach HaKan. This applies both inside and outside of the land of Israel. It applies when the temple does and does not exist, and it applies only to unconsecrated birds. The obligation to cover an animal's blood after slaughter is stricter than this, as it applies to animals and birds, while this applies to just birds, and that applies to both domesticated and captured birds, while this applies only to captured wild birds, such as geese or chicken in an orchard. If these birds nest in a house, or they're Herodian doves, for example, they're exempt from needing to have their mother sent away. Also, by non-kosher birds, this obligation to send away the mother bird does not apply. If a non-kosher bird is sitting on kosher bird eggs, or a kosher bird is sitting on non-kosher bird eggs, this obligation does not apply. It's a debate if there's an obligation to send away the male partridge, as it sits on eggs similar to a female. The Gemara says, chapters 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12 of this tractate all begin with the same points, discussing the relevant obligations and their application application inside and outside of Israel, inside and outside of the temple, and with consecrated and unconsecrated animals. It says, the only real necessity of teaching that these apply inside and outside of Israel was by the prior chapter to reject an opinion that the Fleece Kohanic gift doesn't apply outside of Israel. And the only purpose of specifying that all of these apply when the temple does and does not exist was for the point in chapter 5 to not slaughter an animal and its offspring on the same day, to show this applies even when the temple doesn't exist, in spite of the fact that this topic was discussed by the topic of temple offerings. And it was necessary to teach all of these by consecrated and unconsecrated animals to show that by the sciatic nerve, discussed in chapter 7, that this would apply even when it's consecrated, in spite of the fact that that's pretty obvious that it would apply there too. The reason the obligation of sending away a mother bird doesn't apply to consecrated animals is as that's not sent away, it's brought to the temple treasury. It derives from this that if a bird kills a person, it wouldn't be necessary to send it away to claim its eggs, as in this case the mother bird must at this point instead be brought to court to be stoned. This is where the guilty verdict wasn't yet concluded, hence why it needs to be brought to court. It disputes as to what the exact circumstance of the case of a consecrated bird here would even be. It suggested it could be somebody consecrated doves for Ola offerings from his dovecot, which then escaped, or a hen which is designated for temple upkeep, which then escaped. It disputes the validity of this latter one as to if it could even be referring to a bird designated for temple upkeep. Anyways, we said this obligation to send away the mother bird doesn't apply to domesticated, settled birds. It spent some time sourcing this, and we mentioned Herodian doves as an example, as those are considered to be fully domesticated. It spent some time defining exactly what type of bird this is. We also said the obligation only applies to kosher birds. This is sourced based on specific words used in scripture which refer specifically to kosher birds. This is additionally discussed, and it also sources the fact that if a kosher bird is sitting on non-kosher eggs, in spite of the fact that it's a kosher bird, it nevertheless wouldn't be necessary to send the mother away. There are a number of specific unresolved points on this, such as what if there's an interposition between the mother and the eggs, and what exactly would constitute this, what about feathers or infertile eggs, etc. If a kosher dove is found sitting on the eggs of a kosher pigeon, or vice versa, that's disputed, and it seems to say one would be exempt from sending away the mother bird here. We said there was a debate by a male partridge as it roosts on the eggs similar to a female. This dispute is sourced, and it explains the point applies specifically to the male partridge. New Mishnah. If a mother bird was flying above a nest, somebody is only obligated to send it away if its wings are still touching the nest. This obligation still applies even if there's only one egg. It would not apply if there were fledglings or infertile eggs. The Gemara sources these points. Some say if a bird is sitting between two tree limbs above her nest. Some say if the branches would be removed in theory. If she'd fall on her nest if they were removed, she must be sent away in this case. However, others dispute this, and there's some additional discussion. New Mishnah. If somebody sent the mother bird away, no matter how many times it returns, it must still be repeatedly sent away. If somebody wants to take the mother bird and the eggs, he still needs to send away the mother first. The Gemara spent some time sourcing these principles. New Mishnah. If somebody takes the mother bird while it's still on its young, Rabbi Yehuda says he gets lashes and he doesn't need to send the bird away. The sages say he does need to send the bird away, but he doesn't get lashes. There's a general rule. Any positive commandment in the Torah that exists to rectify a negative commandment, there's no lashes for violating that negative commandment. The Gemara debates as to then why Rabbi Yehuda would hold there is lashes anyway in this case. It essentially is as he holds this positive commandment to send away the mother bird isn't an obligation which resolves a negative commandment, as it's meant to be done to begin with. This is additionally sourced. Anyway, some particularities. The bird must be sent away until it departs from this person's custody. It's a dispute as to whether the bird must be sent away by its legs or by its wings, which is discussed further. It gives some incidents of the performance of this obligation. New Mishnah, last one of the chapter, and the Tractate. A person can't even take a mother bird from its young, not even if he needs this bird to purify a Metzora leper for his offering. And if this mitzvah, which winds up having a person lose about a single Isser coin, it's said about it so that it will be good for you and you will live long, then how much more so would this apply by difficult commandments of the Torah? The Gemara says, all obligations of the Torah that are written with their reward is tied to the resurrection of the dead, as the long life promised by this obligation and also of honoring one's parents is in reference to the world to come, and to the resurrection of the dead. This is seen by a case of a boy who was sent to take eggs from a mother bird by his father, and he died while doing so. Harm was able to come to him even though he was doing a mitzvah, as it was a time of particular danger, and also it said that mitzvahs don't always have the rewards given in this world. This is the reason that the sage Acher became a heretic, as he viewed this incident, or possibly the mutilation of the sage Chutzpitz the Metorgaman by the Romans, and he thought that no reward comes for doing good deeds, but in actuality the reward for doing good is often in the world to come. And that's the end of chapter 12 and the entire Tractate Chullin.